This is meant to be interactive the second half. So if you guys have questions, raise your little cartoon hand and or put it in the chat and we'll make sure that we get to it. So Rachel, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. Welcome again to the call. You get me 2 weeks in a row. You're lucky. We were just Kim and I were chatting before the call came on. And first off, I know Kristen asked you and said if you don't want to, you don't have to. If you could, please change your name. We'd love to see who's on the call rather than everyone as Allie or Courtney with this mix up. Not that hard to change your name really quick and maybe even put what city you're in just so we can kind of see where people are from. Would love to see that. And when you're asking a question, we've kind of got an idea. So I'm not saying if you don't want to, like Kristen did, I'm a little bit more like to the point. Please change your name. Kim, we were talking about before she hopped on, they just did a call where they kind of went over in Ohio, I know, and I'm sure a lot of it is going to correlate to a lot of these states. Some of the like bumps and like hurdles that they're having and what they're doing to overcome those. And so Kim's going to kind of kick us off and maybe go over just a couple of those, Kim, and tell us what you're thinking there.
Yeah, perfect. So we just had a meeting. It actually was the Real Producers Magazine, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have that in your market as well. They hosted an event last week, and the format, we had like two different panels. And so it first started with the president of our association in Columbus. We once were called the board, it was Board of Realtors, but it's now an association. And then the CEO of the association also spoke. So it was really interesting to hear, I think, from both of their perspectives, what was, just how it has gone. Obviously, at the association level, they're not making business decisions for everyone. Brokers obviously have to do that, but the interesting stat that he shared with us, after the change, they were ready. I mean, I think they had everybody on call ready to answer calls and everything like August 18th. Was it August? August 18th and 19th? Is that how long ago it was already? Isn't that a long time ago?
It does.
Anyway, okay. So they were ready to be bombarded with phone calls. And he said they had six phone calls. Now, granted, we have 10,000 agents that are part of the association. So they had six phone calls, and he said three of those were probably staff. So he felt really good about our market and how people have embraced the change. But that was really what the conversation was about, is how we embrace change and how many times we have had changes in our industry and how good things eventually come out of that. And so I feel like one of the underlying messages, and I do feel this is what I'm experiencing in my business, is that you have people that I think are, fully embracing it, just moving forward, and it's not really tripping up their business. And then I think you have another group that maybe are trying to find that workaround, like just fighting it, like, oh, I don't want to deal with this, I don't want to face it. And that's always going to feel super heavy. But that's sort of what we discussed on a bigger scale, and it felt very positive coming out of it. So that's at least what's happening in Ohio.
Yeah, that's really great. I talked to the president of Arizona's association, AAR, for those of you that are in Arizona. I've known her since I was like 7 years old. So I called her the other day and we were chatting, and part of what she said is she was actually a little shocked too at how people have embraced this. And so I think it's really, if you haven't embraced this, it's really, if you've been on these calls with me, I am going to beat this into you until you get it, is finding your value and building your confidence, right? And I find it really interesting. I think, Kim, there's two people. I think the reason you don't have a lot of calls, this is my own opinion, is you have people who don't really sell real estate that don't even know this change happened. And they're going to go write their first contract and they're going to be like, what is this? I'm not getting paid, right? And then you have the people who are like you guys on this call, that you are getting yourself educated. You're talking to your team leads, you're talking to your mentors, your coaches, your brokers, and you're learning what you need to do to build your confidence to work through this. And as someone that's been selling for 20 years, I can tell you the industry has changed so many times. The market has changed so many times, and it's being adaptive. And if you can adjust your mindset to being adaptive and being willing to pivot and change, you can do successful things in this industry. Kim, I want to ask you a question. Since you guys now have the right to negotiate your own commissions and what you're paying, do you see that you've given yourself a pay raise?
I wouldn't, well, I'm not going to say a raise, but I sure as heck have not lost money.
Okay.
So that's good. Yeah. I mean, I've had probably one of the hardest conversations most recently, and it's a repeat client. They're moving out of market. And we'll see. We haven't signed anything yet. I think the first conversation I was trying to get them, I think some of it is it's yes, it's your value, but I also think it's really getting very good at the conversations that are going to be nuanced, right? But it takes a lot of practice to start to role play the questions that they're going to ask you because they don't know. But let me just share I think the big obstacle I was getting from this particular seller. You know, I was sticking up for my side, but they definitely were not going to give the full. I know we probably have to be careful what words we use, I guess. But like,
Well,
if there's six
bananas.
apples on the table,
Yeah.
they weren't going to say six apples, basically. And so, what I was trying to get him to understand is, you know, if you're going like I told him very clearly how many apples I wanted. And then I said, if you're not going to offer as many apples on the other side, you need to be ready for a couple things that could happen. You might have less traffic, right? You might have ready, willing, and able buyers, but they are not sure that they can actually also take care of the rest of the apples. So we talked through that, but I think that was sort of one of the first. It was kind of clunky, going to be honest, because he was asking me questions, and I was sort of like, yeah, I understand why you're asking this, but it was just being able to articulate it
Yeah.
in the best way possible. And, you know, what I was trying to tell him is my strategy is to not get so fixated on those numbers, but to really get them to focus on their net, right? So what we're practicing is preparing like you would for a seller to have a net seller sheet. Basically, you're going to do the same thing when you have the buyer, right? And so when you're sending over this offer, I think it's going to be really important to have a really great summary and also have a net sheet that you send as the person representing the buyer, so the seller 100% understands what your offer means. So there's no room for misinterpretation because some people are attending calls like this and some definitely are not.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, you know, when you have it, you're talking more about that bottom line net. I think you get less pushback on certain items unless they're just really unhappy with what that total net is.
Hmm.
I think these people have done particularly well and they're making a lot of money. And so it's also that, you know, it's just that it's how greedy do you want to be, essentially.
Yeah.
But what I said is, you know, I think we can talk this through 20 different ways, but it's really going to depend on the offers that you receive, you know. And so I said, be prepared that even with whatever you are saying you're going to offer, you might have people write in something different. And I think that's the part as us representing buyers right now, feel confident to say what you want to get paid. You know, I mean, this is something where I think you don't know the conversations that have been had or the details in which the dialogue has been discussed that people on the sell side might not even be totally clear. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I think for us, you know, and I think it's probably what you guys, I'd be interested to know if this is what you guys are doing too, but essentially everything's going in the contract, where we used to never be able to put any of this in the contract. But very clearly stating, you know, seller is going to pay buyer broker X. And just, it doesn't need more language than that. You know, I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's just being super, super clear. And then, like I said, framing it the right way and summarizing it the right way. So whoever you're sending this to really fundamentally understands what they're going to make at the end, because that's what sellers care about.
Yeah, it's all about that bottom line. I will tell you personally, I am the opposite of you. I am telling
Come
myself
on, Rachel.
not to offer anything upfront. And everyone is doing this differently. We on our team, we are basically saying to the sellers, hey, this is the average commission that people are paying, and here's a net sheet so that you have a general idea. But we have a line in there that basically says that we are allowed to tell a buyer's agent, my seller is open to paying compensation, but it must all be negotiated. We are not telling them up front because I will tell you, I am really saddened by the offers I get on my listings. I have not had one buyer ask for more than 2.5 bananas. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's such
My
a good
team's not
point.
allowed to ask for anything less than four, right? And
Yeah.
so all I'm saying is it doesn't matter what we ask for. The same way you don't have to call and ask, is the seller open to paying concessions for your buyer's closing costs. You just put it in the offer and negotiate it. All that matters to that seller is the bottom line. If you can make the main number work and you can work all the other numbers out and make that seller happy, at the end of the day, that's how we're doing it, just based on my readings of the DOJ lawsuit. So we'll leave that where it is. We're putting 0 on all our listing agreements and just saying we are open to paying compensation. Now, depending on the state you're in or your broker, you can do it multiple ways, right? And so I think getting back to what I want to jump to Tina about is in all of this, it's getting back to the basics. I think so much we get so caught up in these changes that we forget that the basic is the bottom line. Right? We get so caught up in the numbers that we forget that like it's actually simpler because we get caught up because I think at the end of the day, sometimes we get caught up in the numbers because now we have to show our value to our buyers, which we've never really had to do. We've had to explain to the sellers, hey, you can actually negotiate this based on the offer that comes in. And so we're not used to these conversations. We're not confident. And so we make it a way bigger deal than it really is when at the end of the day, we just go back to the basics. So Tina, let's jump into what you want to talk about with going back to the basics and helping people kind of change their mind about that.
Yeah. And I want to loop back to your 4 bananas later. So don't let me forget.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think as I went back through everything that I and my team members have been doing, it's just, I'm going to paraphrase what you just said. I've been through many different kinds of market changes. I really cut my teeth in the 2008 to 2012 timeframe when home values in my area just went down and down and down. I went on the most brutal listing appointments at that time. And that was early in my career where I wasn't always pre-qualifying before the appointment and like finding out how much they owed. And, I went on so many listing appointments where they couldn't list. And I had to look people in the eye and give them terrible news about their equity and basically like crush their dreams. I don't know if anyone else felt that way, but I feel like I went on countless appointments and I wouldn't take any of that back because kind of along the lines of what Kim was saying, like these conversations are so clunky until you practice them enough to get through it and find your words and like find your own way. Like I've never really done that well adopting other people's scripts. I've just had to kind of know the point that I want to get across and practice saying it until I can get there. And ideally, you're like a really good egg and role play and script practice a whole lot. But at the end of the day, even if that's something where you're a little bit weaker, I think it's just showing up, looking people in the eye, being direct, and just like working through that discomfort. Because I think about, all the different iterations of that I've had to work through. There was the negative equity conversation that was really predominant in the, main first chapter of my career. Then it was getting price reductions, which came right after that, right? When I would list homes and then the market kept going down and like having to, talk to people again and like take ownership for the pricing strategy. And I mean, that's been something that I think has just served me well overall is taking ownership for so much that I don't leave very much up to chance. And it's not that I'm in charge of what the market does, but what I am in charge of is giving my clients the clearest, most honest, candid picture of what is very likely to happen, very along the lines of what Kim was saying, like, hey, if you don't do this, here are some potential ramifications. What would you like to do? And then they make the decision and they're not coming back to me later saying, well, you said, but it's all about taking more time up front to have the conversation. And I'm impatient. I don't know how many of you just want to like drop like a little two-word statement and like be on to the next because that's how I am kind of intrinsically. So I've had to learn to really like lean into the discomfort, slow down, say what needs to be said, pause, let it land. Maybe if you even want to puke a little bit while you're like watching the reaction and just have the conversation all the way through. So that's been my experience with kind of the trickier seller side pieces earlier on in my career. And now on the buyer side, it's just, it's the same exact thing with different words of, it is true. Like it's been necessary to show my value as a buyer agent to some degree, but this is just, a totally different realm, a totally different ballpark. And having, been doing this for almost 20 years, like it has been uncomfortable for me. And, my main business partner who is interfacing with most of our clients in the field, it has been uncomfortable for her. There's no, what's the option? Leave the industry. So for us, it's just going forward, communicating as much as possible. And that's like where the back to basics part comes to mind for me of, am I setting expectations? Am I giving people a clear picture? Am I maybe having that tough conversation and then backing that up with an email later so they can like digest it or remember it? Because I don't know if any of you struggle with this, but sometimes you can tell everyone something they need to know in an appointment, but they don't remember half of it. And I just moved, and now I'm like, now I know why no one remembers anything. Like my brain has been scrambled by moving into a new house. Like our clients just can't even retain and understand that much. And then the last thing I'll say is it is so complicated and it is kind of hard to explain. It just feels so unnatural that there's that extra leap of helping people understand. So I just feel like there's no shortcuts here. But if I think about those really hard times early in my career, they made me the agent that I am. They gave me the, you know, the clients that are so loyal to me because I did really show up and do the work. And it was very clear to them that I was coming at everything with like the most integrity that I possibly could. And that's why they're coming back around later.
Yeah. And I would say if I had to jump in here and say anything, I would say two things. I said this on every call I'm on, and this is my third call with you ladies. So thank you for being here. You have to do a buyer consult. If you are not sitting down with your buyer before you ever take them out to do to show properties, you are doing them a disservice. And in that buyer consult, you can ask anyone on my team. They hate it. I always ask, how many questions did you ask them? Did you ask them this? Did you find this out? Did you ask this? I am really big on asking people questions. The more questions you ask people, the more you can find out about their situation and you can give them the best service possible. Also, call me crazy. I feel like everyone should understand personalities in this business. If you are not studying personalities and understanding people, you're doing yourself a disservice. You know, Kristen always says I'm a unicorn. Like, how do you do what you do? You know what I do? I have studied personalities for years. When I'm in a buyer consult, I can literally ask certain questions and go, this person's this way. I know exactly how to talk to them. Right. And so that is how you can get through some of these tough conversations, is asking a lot of questions to people. When they say something that kind of like even throws you off in all of this, right? Because you're probably nervous into some appointment. Ask the question, what makes you say that? Dig deeper into the one sentence that they're saying when they're like, well, I didn't have to do this on my last house and I'm not doing it now. What makes you say that? What guard do you have up against signing this buyer broker agreement? What experience do you have with buying a house in this type of market? Oh, none. Your last house was 15 years ago. Let's sit down and talk about that. Right? You got to get better at asking questions, being very curious about why people are making these big decisions in their life, because selling and buying are very big decisions, right? And so you can't just go sign this document, I'm getting paid this, and we're going to go look at houses. You got to have a little bit more humanity to that and go have a buyer consult with them. Find out what they're looking for, why they're making this move. And for your sellers, find out the same thing, right? I tell people it's time or money. Can I want to sell really quick because you got to get XYZ? Okay, this is our new pricing. This is what we're going to do. Right? Oh, you have some time and you want max dollar? Okay, we're going to do all of this to get your house ready. And it might take XYZ, but if you're okay with that, this is the option. Right? You've got to be able, the same way that we've done this with sellers. And this is actually why I love these buyer broker agreements. I love that we can negotiate our own pay. Is I think previous in our industry, everyone, when they first got in or they got a buyer, they just get excited and they'd go out and show that buyer. And they never really gave the buyer a true consult the way that we do sellers. We go to a seller's home, we look at their home, we run comps for them, we meet with them, we go over all of these numbers and we do bottom lines for them. And most people never did that with a buyer. And then it comes to closing and they're like, you need XYZ for closing. And people are like, what? This is forcing us to treat by a little bit more professionalism, which I love. I've always done buyer consults. Most people haven't. This is forcing us to do that, right? And so it's bringing a little bit more of that professionalism to the buying side, which I love. But what I want to encourage you guys is like Tina said, and even Kim, is going back to the basics, getting comfortable with these conversations, right? Practicing with people. I'm not a huge fan of scripts. I might get in trouble for saying that. Scripts are good to help you like have an idea of things, right? I have a lot of like I have my out of curiosity, what makes you say that, right? You got to have talking points, but you also have to learn to understand people. And so if I can give you a piece of advice outside of real estate and also that will probably help you with your whole life, go learn some personalities and how to connect with people. It'll probably help all your relationships, right? And so when you do that, you can learn to understand if this is a type A personality, you know what? I might have to follow this up with a way more thorough email than I do a person that is an outgoing sanguine type person, right? They're not even going to read my lengthy email. So don't even do it, right? So you have to learn to adapt to people. And when you do that, people go, wow, she's paying attention to me. She speaks my language. She knows what I want. And that is how people remember you for a decade and come back to you, is because they remember how you made them feel, not what you did for them. And being able to make people feel something means you have to understand them, which means you have to give people the time of day. You have to sit down and have some of these tough conversations, ask them why they're doing what they're doing, go through that and be able to explain what is your end goal here. Most sellers, it is the bottom line, right? And so be able to explain to them, this is how we're going to try to get to your bottom line. None of the numbers before that actually matter except mine, because that's what we're agreeing on right now. Other than that, everything's negotiable. And this is what I love. There's going to be no surprises. When we get an offer, you're going to get a net sheet exactly with what that buyer is offering at that time, and you can fix it or not. Right. And so being able to explain that to a seller, it's going to take some confidence. And so all I can tell you is work on learning to understand people, connect yourself with people. These calls are great, but connect yourself with people locally, whether it's a mentor, a coach, a team lead, a good brokerage that can help you get better at having these conversations. Because the first step is trying to understand and learn. The second step is actually going out there and do it. Right. I take people on listing appointments with me. I go on listing appointments with my team. I went on one on Friday and she was like, I got to go on so many more with you to get us good. She's like, I think I need 6 to 8 more. I'm like, let's do it. Right. And so team up with someone that can help you, that you can hear. Sometimes just hearing how someone communicates with someone, ask questions. Oh, you know what? This person is done with this meeting. Let's wrap it up. Because if we string this out, we're not getting the business. You got to learn to read that stuff. Right. And so all I can do is say, connect with people who can really, really help you. And you can get through this tough time in your mind, because it's really not a tough time in general. The market is still moving. It's still booming. People are buying and selling. We just have to get better at these conversations. Right. So now that we're almost through halfway through the call, we really want this to be interactive. Does anyone have a specific question? You can put your hand up if you know how to do it in Zoom. I actually don't. Or you can put it in the chat and we will try to get to it. And then Randy, can you watch the Facebook too? And if there's questions that you guys are live watching this on Facebook, not on Zoom, feel free to throw them in the messages there and Randy will get those to us so that we can answer those for you. Any
Can I
questions?
say one thing while we wait for questions? I feel like you just gave a sermon, Rachel. It was awesome. And I was thinking about like the personality piece of it, and like the disc profile for me is a very helpful frame of reference. So if anyone doesn't know that yet, like Google free disc, DISC. It's such a good framework. And one thing that's helped me is I have my buyers fill out a little intake form. It's actually a long, little is a very inaccurate word. It's a long intake form before the buyer consultation. And it tells you everything about personality, how long their answers are, how fear-based they are, how many exclamation points they use. If they just don't do any of it and just want to show up and have a little chit chat. So that's like a great hack if you're getting more comfortable with figuring out personalities, is like if you can deploy a form like that, you spend time pairing and then just show up with a little bit more intentionality.
For sure. I love that. Yvonne, I see your hands up. You're in Los Angeles. Tell us what question you got.
Thank you. And I missed you guys last week because I was canceling the contract that I had questions of earlier with you guys. And I appreciate this. But it's interesting. You talked about you're getting 2.5% and bananas, whatever. And you're not seeing 4. And then somebody said they were going to talk about the 4, because what I'm struggling with is and I related that this time I settled because it was a family member. But I'm struggling with the selling agents, the listing agents are basically telling their clients no more than two. So I'm fighting for that. I'm arguing constantly for that. And so I have a question about that. And then I appreciate everything you guys are saying. And I'm always going to ask questions if no one does, because I'm going to take advantage of this moment. So thank you for all of your
For sure.
experience. And the other thing is, though, I'm wondering, yes, houses are selling and moving, but out here, people still think it's a seller's market and things are sitting 47 days, and yet interest rates are very high. And I'm finding there's really not a lot of negotiations. Agents will say, bring it to the table, we'll negotiate. And then we negotiate, and it's always coming down to right now I have to meet with a lender and a buyer today because we were counter offered, and they want us to meet the appraisal difference because we're pretty sure it's not going to appraise at that price. So these questions, how do we work with listing agents who have kind of predispositioned the sellers what to settle for?
I would say it's the same thing you're doing with your sellers, but now you're trying to help a third party be a little bit smart, right? I'll give an example. A few weeks ago, an agent on my team wrote an offer on a house. We asked for our percentage. They came back and said 2. We had asked for our 4. We were willing to settle at 3. Seller came back and said 2. So you know what we did? This is an area where houses are sitting on the market for 110 days. It was a nice house. It was on the market for the first weekend, and we had given them full price and just asked for our commission. Buyer didn't ask for anything else. So you know what we did? We said, okay, then here's a new price. We dropped our price. You know what? Within like an hour, they came back and accepted our offer. We're like, we're not giving you full price. Like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And so our clients were willing to lose that house because they were like, there's others out there, right? There's a lot on the market right now. And so I think it's educating even some of these listing agents that, hey, this dollar amount doesn't matter. What's your seller's net? What are they looking for? How can we get there? Right? This is where our job is to be the professional and think outside the box, right? And be that professional and go, hey, what if we bumped price a couple $1,000s? I think we could push that appraisal to get that done. I'm happy to help put together an appraisal report and get this there for us. Could you then cover this so my client doesn't have to come out of pocket for it? Right? It's all about that negotiation, even with the listing agent, when they're saying they're prepping their client for 2. Okay, well, that's not the offer that came in. Did you prep your client to pay any concessions when you listed the house? Probably not. So let's come back to the basics of the bottom line. And so that's where you have to ask the listing agent those same questions. How can we get to your client's bottom line? Right? And so that's what I would say with those things.
We do have some questions in the
Yeah,
chat.
I'm getting to those right now. Okay.
Hey, Rachel, I just wanted to add one thing. I
Yeah.
think the other part of this, Yvonne, I feel like relationships on the other side of the deal are so, so important. And so I would use this as an opportunity that, who cares how much experience that person has? Because I think everybody's tripping up over this if they're new or they've been in the business a long time. Use this as an opportunity to lead with grace, but lead with knowledge and frame it in a way where it is dummy proof. So, to Rachel's point, however they're explaining the numbers to their clients, just make sure they understand the concept of here's what they walk away with at the end. You could slice it up 20 different ways, but have them focus on what they walk away with at the end. Because
Yeah.
in that example that Rachel just shared, it's like, okay, well, we'll send you a different number. To me, that says they have no idea, like they did not understand the offer, And so I just think that time that it takes for you to, first of all, call the agent after you send the offer, explain it, but write it. I always write the offer like basically like a cover page. I write it with the expectation that they're going to forward it directly to the client, directly to their client. So not using industry jargon, trying to like bullet point what are the highlights, what are the big things? Because to me, I feel like some of the things that I have used, say in multiple offer situations, I don't want those little, like, I'm not going to say they're tricky, but they're strategic. I don't want that to get lost. Like, I want them to understand what the value is of that. So, like, literally bullet it out and
Yeah.
then call them and follow
Yeah.
up and be the nice follow up, not the, oh my God, did you get my offer? Just be like, hey, hope you're doing well. I'm sure you're slammed. Just wanted to take a second to explain our offer and see if you have any questions. Just
Yeah.
be like, lead with the grace that you would want on the other end. And I think it pays off.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to jump to one of these questions. Tina, I'm going to have you run with this answer. It's from Christy. Christy, not sure what state you're in, but she says, I'm a brand new agent and I already have clients. I know I need to practice wording, but having scripts to start would be would help. Any advice for newbies without experience? Tina, you want to give her some of your advice?
Yeah,
Think?
it's a great question. And I feel like it's such a common feeling that everyone has of like, what do I say? So I think, first of all, I would make like an inventory for yourself of everything that you bring to the table, your past experiences, skills that you have, um, any connections you have, social media influence, access to other people, relationships with top agents, whoever's mentoring you, if you have a mentor, your team. Because I feel like first you have to be clear on what your value is. And right now in your mind, it might be like, I'm brand new, like I have time, I have enthusiasm, and those are great. I would imagine there's a lot more. So I would do that as like an exercise to be like, okay, what else is it that I'm bringing to the table? Because for me, I like to have my talking points. It's so hard when, someone asks you like a direct question like that. Well, I know you're brand new, what do you bring to the table, and you don't want to stutter. So I would want to have in my mind like the 2 or 3 things that are most important. And if someone's really questioning your experience specifically, that's where it is so important to be clear on like who your mentor or team lead is, and to be able to articulate exactly how they're going to be involved in the process and what training and preparation you're already bringing to the table, and then just expressing that confidence. So that would be like my main tip of just
Yeah.
prepare yourself, because people will
Yeah.
ask, not always, but they will.
Yeah. And I'm going to jump on that. And then Kim, I'm going to have you jump on the other question because they're from Cincinnati. So Christy, the advice I can give you is I am very big on who you work with matters. And so as a new agent, you need to be connecting yourself with someone local, whether it's a team or a mentor, that you can lean on their numbers so that you can actually call out the elephant in the room. Hey, I know I'm a new agent. Let's get that out there. So we're all thinking it, right? And go, but this is who I've connected myself with. They've closed this many transactions per year. They've been selling for this many years, and they're going to be hands-on in this transaction. And if you want to meet them, I'm more than happy to even hop you on a call with them. Work with someone who's willing to do that to help support you. Right? That is why who you work with matters. As a new agent, you've got to be connecting yourself to people who are successful so that you can lean on them and start building that business on your own. And then you can start using your numbers. Hey, I've closed XYZ. In the beginning, I always tell my team, call it the elephant in the room and then say what the team's done, what I've done. Use me. I don't care. Call me. Right? So work with someone like that. Kate has a question here. I'll just jump in and say, and Kim, you can add to what we're using for seller net sheets. I use actually a Google Doc that does all of this on the buy and the sell side, and I love it because it's not title specific. Some of the title companies have all their branding on it. You can get it from a title company if you're looking for a seller net sheet. They typically also do buyers, but Kim, I'll let you jump on that for Ohio. But the next question, she says, what about on buy side to show potential closing costs? Including potential buyer paid bananas, worst case scenario. How do you go about showing them those numbers?
Love the question. Yeah, net seller sheet. I actually, I tend to just use title company stuff. You can actually, depending if you have like an affiliation, if you always work with one title company, ask them to brand it for you because that's not super hard to do. But I find people don't get super tripped up on the branding of it. Just like focus on the meat and potatoes. This is one of these things that I'm like, just get the data to them first, and you can make it pretty later. So if you don't have anything, start with a title company. They have plenty of them. Our brokerage just created something that we can now use in Loop, and it's more of the reverse where it's the buyer seller net seller sheet. So if you don't have that, start asking, go to your broker and say, hey, can we create this? Can we put a template in Loop that we can use? Because it's not super complicated. So hopefully that helps. I just think more than anything, just populate something and get it in front of a client because it works. You
Yeah.
think that this is something everybody's doing, and not everybody is doing it. But it's so much easier to talk from a real example versus, just feeling like you're filling the space with words. Just show them what you can show them, and then ask them if they have questions, and be okay with it being quiet for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, in terms of the second part of the question, I'm looking at it right now. So, potential buyer paid bananas. This is also where I think relationships are really important. You guys have really good relationships with lenders, because whether it's the lender that you want them to use, or if it's another lender, you can always reference, you can always, like, if I don't know the lender, I'll ask them. But if I need to double check it with someone who I work with often, they don't mind doing that if you have that relationship with them, right? So don't feel like you have to answer this yourself. Every scenario is going to be different based on their particular situation. So have a lender just give you a ballpark, like, here's the value of the house, here's what they're putting down, here's kind of what we're looking at, here's, whatever, like taxes, all this stuff. Like, give them as much information as you can, and just ask them for a range. I just always ask for a range. I never want to be I never want to be in the situation where someone's like, Kim told me it was going to be this. Like, make sure it's estimated value and it's a range, because that is protecting you. But use your resources. This is where I think when you start thinking about what you do and what you often are at the center of a transaction with all these different people who are really important. And the person that you're working for doesn't know those same people. So don't underestimate that you're at the center of that. Have these conversations. That's a huge part of your value, but build up these relationships. And if there's something that's missing, if you don't have enough trusted lenders in your arsenal, go have some coffees. Like, now's the time. Like, I would schedule coffee a couple times a week. Find the people who are willing to pour into you and you pour into them. Find something that you connect with on, besides just the numbers, because you need these relationships more now than ever, I think.
Yeah. And that's where, the lender, super, super important. But also once you get that estimate, right? That's where you need to be able to tell your client, this is the cash to close at worst case scenario. If the seller is not willing to pay XYZ, do you even want to move forward with this house? But you can work with the lender, how specific. Hey, as we're negotiating through this, you should be in contact with that lender as you're asking for the seller for these things in the offer, and they counter back. You get that counter. And before you ever call your client, you be like, this counter, based on my talking to the lender, this exact house, this sales price, this taxes, and what they've agreed to pay in bananas, your cash to close would be XYZ. Are you okay with this, or would you like to counter offer number 2? And then when you have that discussion with them and you counter offer number 2, you call your lender back and go, this is what we're countering. Can you give me an updated if this counter offer 2 is accepted? And you send that over to your client and go, this is what I'm estimating your net is going to be on if they accept this counter offer 2. Are you okay with that? If they are, send it over. If they're not, go, okay, we got to budget this by another $1,000 or 2, whatever it is, right? So that lender that you're working with needs to be very much involved, or at least the numbers enough to be able to be like, based on what we're asking, this is what you're going to owe. And be able to give that to your client as you're negotiating the offer. It doesn't need to come at the end. It needs to come with the first offer and every counter offer that comes in, right? Randy, are there any questions on the Facebook?
No, we're good. We covered those.
We did cover those. Okay, perfect. Any other questions on the Zoom? Anyone want to raise their hand and ask a question? Everyone's so quiet and scared.
I can fill up the space, Rachel.
Go ahead. I'm like,
You're like, what are we going to talk about? Well,
no,
okay.
I could
So
talk all day too. So
every time I'm having this conversation, of course, it goes a lot into marketing and what are we doing, even just to find the right people who we want to be working with. So I would use this time of year. I would use the opportunity of where we are in the space with the industry you're already going to start thinking through, what is my value? How can you start using that in your marketing in ways that's not salesy? How can you just be a resource to your clients forever, between transactions, which now is like an average of 12 years, I heard. So think through these things, because I mean, you guys know my love for social media, but if you're not passionate about social, I don't really care, but you can't ignore sharing your value right now. You cannot ignore it. But you've got to be able to do it in a way that's relevant to people and meet them where they are. So if you have somebody who closed last year, start thinking through, like, shoot, what do you think they're coming up on? They're 1 year in their house. They probably have like maintenance stuff they've got to think through. Just like start thinking through, get in a room with like three other people and figure, maybe you just brainstorm a list. But I think these are where all really good marketing ideas come from. In socials, obviously the cheapest and easiest way to get this information back in your face into your clients, be in their face with it. But think through what problems, what pain points, things that they have right now, and be that person, become the resource that you're the first person they're going to call.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think goes back to what Tina was talking about too in the beginning, and myself, about finding out their needs, the back to the basics, right? When we find out about them, their family, why they're selling, why they're moving, why they're this, why they're that, when you show them that you care, they're going to come back to you. Those are little things that you could do, right? Some of the things, I'll go through some ideas here, Kim. You have like the 1 year, right? People that are coming up on that. I will tell you, if you are working with a good lender, you need to be communicating with them for people that you closed last year. As rates are coming down, this is the best reason to call people for a refinance. When you save them money every month, they're going to love you and they're going to refer people to you. They're going to call you back because you remembered your interest rate was at a 7. Oh, and rates got down to 5.5. You should call XYZ back and refinance. And when they save $300 a month, who are they going to love? You. Right? So those are some things that you guys should be staying in contact with. And if you don't know what your client's rates at, maybe that's something you need to start keeping an eye on, especially in this market. Back in 2020, 2021, when things were like crazy, no one was keeping really track of this because we're like, you're never going to refinance this loan, right? But when your clients were at a higher rate, you should be watching that. I watch that for all my clients. I just had a call on Friday with one of my lenders, be like, who do we need to call that is now at the point that they are good to refinance from the last 2 years, right? Those are conversations you should be having with your lender and your buyer, right? To be able to come in contact. This is how we show our value, that when they come back to you for another buy and sell, this conversation about buyer broker agreements, commissions becomes so easy because you've given them so much value over all this time. This is how over time, do you guys see how this new concept feels hard right now? But as you start giving value to people, they're going to sign that document, no problem, because you literally gave them value after all these closings without anything along the way, right? And so that's how we stay in contact with people and show our value. If you've been on my calls before, I talk about all the time, like, our value is so high. The average buyer's agent spends 120 hours on every transaction. That is a lot of hours. So if you work out what you want to make per hour, that's how you should be working backwards to be like, this is what I'm going to charge on my buyer broker agreement, right? If you're like, I'm not working for less than $20 an hour, figure out number. Right? Someone asked us, coming back to the 4 bananas. We come back to the 4 bananas, and I'll tell you why on my team we do that. Because it's a really hard conversation based on the DOJ law that says, or I shouldn't call it a law, it's not even finalized yet, which is ridiculous. Based on the DOJ, if you go up in what you originally signed, you have to explain to them that that is technically their money. If you signed at 2.5 bananas and you took your client to a builder, like I just had a builder give us almost 4 bananas. How are you going to go to your clients and have that awkward conversation? You guys are already struggling to have a conversation to get it signed at 2.5 bananas. Now go back and have that conversation that says, hey, you know that document you signed that I said my value was at 2.5 bananas? Well, the builder actually thinks my value's at 4, and that money is really yours, but could you sign this document to actually give it to me? It's a hard conversation to have. You know what a better conversation is this is everything we do. We charge 4 bananas. Well, the builder on this one or the seller, we got them to 3.5 bananas. You know what? We are going to reduce this for you to 3.5 bananas, and we are not going to charge you that difference. But in return, we'd like you to tell all your family and friends about us and how great we were and how we got this great deal for you. Which conversation do you want to have? Right? The first one's a really awkward one. I'd rather have, this is my value. If I choose to come below it, it's because I want something from you to go tell everyone what I did and how great I was. Right? And you'd be surprised. I've had so many people since August 17th make up the difference that we charged to pay us because they saw our value. And so what I can tell you, I've said this on the last call, and if you didn't do it on the last call and you were there, I'm going to say it again, and hopefully you feel a little bad and you go do it today. Go write down everything you do from start to finish for a buyer. And I promise you, you'll change your mind and go, wow, I do a lot. One of my friends that's a team lead has a list of 137 things that a buyer's agent does from start to finish. One of my other friends is 97. You should probably be between that 90 to 120 on average, if I'm guessing, on everything you do from start to finish. When you lay that out, you're going to be like, wow, I am valuable and I am going to explain this to my buyer and show my value. But if you don't even recognize what you do and you didn't write that out and know, it's really hard to go into those meetings and be like, I'm valuable when you don't know why you're valuable. Right. And so the best thing I can encourage you to do is write down what makes you valuable, what you do. And maybe if you want to do something different in your niche or things like that, that is above and beyond, write that down and then go run with that on social media. Kim can help you figure out how to do that. Right. And so all I'm telling you is you got to know your value and you've got to be able to run with it. Right. Let's keep it simple. Bottom line, whether it's a buyer or a seller, right? What Tina was talking about, that bottom line. What is the seller making? That's all that matters. Buyer, what's the cash out of pocket and what's your monthly payment? Nothing else really matters. Those are the three biggest numbers, right? Let's focus on those. Let's keep it simple. Let's know our value. Let's communicate with people well. Let's go learn personalities and let's be the best agents that we can be. If you can understand yourself and your value and you can understand people, you guys on this call will be the most successful of the Moms in Real Estate group. If you can do those things and
Hey,
find
Rachel,
that.
one
Yeah.
thing I just want to say too is I know everybody on here probably operates differently, but I'm going to guess a lot of you guys are sphere-based models where, you're probably getting a lot of your clients from your sphere. There were some stats that we heard last week, and I think this is an NAR stat. I can't remember, but it's something crazy that I think it's 86% of clients would reuse the same agent, but 91% of agents do not follow up with their clients. 91%. Like, don't be one of the 91%. Be the 9%. Yeah. Because here's the deal is I think that yes, we have to get used to practicing the value. And I think some of you guys might be overwhelmed with that. Just AI it, you guys. Like, start with something. Okay. Don't walk out of here and not do it. Type it into AI and you can say, yes, I do that, or no, I don't do that.
Ask ChatGPT. Give me 100 things.
Exactly. Yes. In my market, tell me what I'm doing.
And then tweak it.
And then tweak it. But I think the reality is we start to think about this and get so overwhelmed. So I don't know if you're sitting here saying like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. This makes me sweat. And so I'm just not going to do anything. Please don't hang up on this call and do that. I think I would rather you guys flip it and feel like, what am I going to go tackle today? Maybe you're going to have a conversation with somebody and you are going to explain your value. Maybe you are going to just pick up the phone and talk to a client and say like, hey, how are you doing? Just wanted to check in. Real estate's naturally going to become a part of that conversation. You don't have to lead with that, but it will get there. I was so shocked how easy the conversation started to become with my core client group. They're very loyal. They just ask like, hey, how, like, they want to know from our perspective, what's happening and how are you feeling and how is this going with the industry? And I'm like, it's fine. It's business as usual. Things are still selling. People are still buying. Like, everything is great. What I love is that the conversation can be so simple. One line, you guys use this if you want. When I'm talking with the buyer, I usually start off the consult and say, I still work through the same process. There's just a little bit of paperwork that you have to sign now at the beginning versus signing it at the end. And honestly, it's in your benefit that you're signing it at the beginning. So let's talk about it. And what I say is, I do this with sellers, and you deserve the same priority. That if I'm going to work with you, you're going to work with me, and we're going to be loyal to each other. And this document basically verifies that. It's also going to tell you what I do, and it's my fee of how much I get paid to do all these things for you. And
Yeah.
the easier that you say that, the less words you use, people are they're like, okay, that sounds great. So I just think, like, we lead with fear. We get scared. We fill all this space with all these words we don't need to use. And then we get tripped up and we sound like we don't know what we're doing. And that's not the case. You guys are very good at what you do. So, I mean, back to the confidence thing, it's like, just have the bullet points and map it out, but lean into the conversations, pick up the phone, direct message people. I love audio message. Like, audio messages are great. And I love it when they respond back and they're like, I don't know what happened to that voicemail. I'm like, great, they disappear. That's fine. Just however it is that they can hear your voice, this is the time for you. I really think the separator of this is going to be people who are showing up and getting in front of people, and people who are just sitting back. There's an opportunity for you. You just have to be brave enough in that little minute to be like, I can do this. And then it becomes much easier. You just have to take the first step.
For sure. Love that. So if you took anything from this call, go back to the basics, keep it simple, find your value, go understand people, and ask more questions. That's what I can tell you. Before we jump off of here, Randy or Kristen, do you want to jump in and say anything coming up in the group as for training or anything like that for anyone that they want to hop on?
Well, I'll just jump in and piggyback kind of on what Kim was talking about, which is, how do you attract the right people? And this is an opportunity to really, whether you're a brand new agent or a seasoned agent, to ask yourself where you want to go from here and who you want to work with. And so tomorrow, Kim and Whitney actually are going to jump on with us, and they have Real Social. And something that we're going to talk about, that we talk about once a month, is how to authentically attract clients, right? And so that's a great call. If you're kind of thinking like, all right, well, how do I start attracting? Make sure you get on that call.
What time is that call? And is it in the Moms in Real Estate group?
Yep, it's on the cover photo. So you guys can always see all of our upcoming events under upcoming events or on the cover photo.
Okay, perfect. So there's that. Anything else you want them to know about before we hop off?
No, just on that call, we did mix it up. You used to just watch the live stream. Now you can jump on. And again, this is one of those things that if you're watching on the live stream, that's great. We get it. Everybody's busy, but there's not a way to create the value the same as showing up, right? When you show up, you actually can ask the questions yourself and get it as it applies to you. So even tomorrow with Kim and Whitney, jump on the call and ask your questions. Get that value direct hand versus just, being the fly on the wall.
Awesome. Thanks, ladies.
Right? Thanks, ladies. Happy Monday. Let's go kick butt. Bye, guys.
Thank you.